For this lecture, I want to talk about predator-prey relationships. It's another of the type of interactions that take place. There are a lot of organisms that eat something else, especially animals. By definition, animals get their energy from another organism, so they're predators. There's also a lot that get eaten, so they're prey. So this predator-prey relationship, or exploitation as we looked at it before, is really important in a lot of the ecology of a lot of organisms, and it's interaction that means the difference between them surviving and not surviving. Up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, there's these albatross, these
the birds that aren't
albatross,
quite airworthy have to plunk down in the gentle surf, where tiger sharks are
they're ready
waiting
to fly. So they fly out on the water, they're sitting there.
The young bird tries with all its might to
They're gonna be
mimic its
away from
parents
land
and
for
get
2 years.
airborne.
There they are, and then these tiger sharks come up and eat them. It happens in June every year. Actually, this island just got
Tiger
washed
sharks
away by a
consume
hurricane.
10% of all the
Last year,
albatross
so
young
this
in this
isn't taking
colony.
place anymore, but it wasn't much fun. But quite a scene.
This drama plays out
Tiger
every
sharks
year,
eating albatross. Every day they show up.
and the sharks
Eat a
don't
couple of
always
albatross.
win.
Every year
In
they would
fact,
show up.
sometimes the shark gives the albatross the inspiration to fly.
Sitting on the water,
Amazing what knowing you're about to be eaten can do for your motivation.
They flew a little ways, and it was only about 50 feet, 100 feet, and then boom, they get eaten by a tiger shark. There's quite dramatic displays of this predator-prey relationships. In nature, we don't like to see it a lot of times, but it happens. And on the TV shows like that tiger shark, they show a lot of prey getting away because it does happen, but it makes us feel a little better. They don't show things getting killed a lot of times because we don't like to see that so much, but it happens. Things get eaten all the time. So we're going to look at this. If you've got a population of predators and you have a population of prey and they're interacting, they're going to affect one another. And what we're going to look at basically is that the population of one side of that predator can affect the population of prey. Population of prey is going to affect the population of predators. And remember, populations really are a sum of there's individuals that are coming into the population, being born or being hatched or however they come about. There's new individuals, and some of those die. And so if you get eaten by a predator, that's taken away from the population. If you're eating a lot of prey, that's energy that's going towards reproducing and adding to the population. So you can imagine how predators are affecting prey by killing them, prey population, and the prey is affecting the predator population by supplying energy that's channeled towards reproduction. So here's a couple of questions that one might ask in terms of this relationship between predators and prey. Does the predation reduce the size of the prey populations below carrying capacity? Well, a lot of times it does. A lot of times that's what drives down the prey population to a certain level. And then the second question, do predator-prey interactions cause the population of prey to fluctuate? So these questions are in relation to that curve, that S-curve, logistic curve that we looked at that demonstrates population growth. When the rate at which it grows is influenced by predators because the intrinsic rate of increase of a population is influenced by the mortality rate. So if individuals are being killed, then they're limiting the rate at which the population is growing. And then when they get to the carrying capacity, reach this level that can be supported by the ecosystem, by the habitat, then predators are influencing the population of prey by knocking it down, by eliminating some individuals there. there's a lot of interest in predator-prey relationships because, from a broader ecological point of view, because as we mentioned before, there's a lot of populations that we're interested in. We want to know what the population of wolves is. We want to know what the population of bald eagles is. We want to know what the population of mosquitoes is. So there's game species that are managed. One species feeds on another one or gets eaten by another one. Deer and coyotes, things like that. There's endangered species. We look at this one species, but this species, sometimes the explanation for what's happening with the species has to do with predation or has to do with prey availability. Pests, certainly, the population growth, pests, what's controlling them, different mechanisms for controlling pest populations, like introducing predators, a lot of times hasn't gone well. And then how communities work, the number of interactions that there are between species. We're going to return and look at this Lotka-Volterra model. We looked at this in terms of competition. One species that's competing against another one can influence each other's population. One in the Lotka-Volterra model, in terms of competition, theoretically one population can win out over another one, and the other population, the loser, goes extinct. Well, it's a similar situation here, but the relationship that we're looking at is between predators and prey. Prey population affecting predator population, and predator population affecting prey population. So it's as simple as that. That populations are usually, they reach an asymptote, and they're at some level up and down around their carrying capacity in a habitat. Some populations go up and down. The variation isn't steady. The variation it's wide. There's population booms and there's population busts. And so these mathematicians, Lotka-Volterra, they developed this model to look at populations, how one population affects another one. That's what we're going to look at. So there's some math here, but we're not going to get all caught up in this. We're really just going to look at and focus on what affects a predator population. I mean, what makes a predator population go up or go down at a certain rate, and what affects that rate? That's what we're asking in terms of prey. And on the contrary, what affects a prey population? What makes a prey population grow at a certain rate, deaths basically, and what makes a population reach a certain level and go down, or not reach a certain level? What controls the carrying capacity of a population in terms of predators feeding on them? So we looked at before this logistic curve, this S-shaped curve that a wild, normal population, natural population would experience, where it would demonstrate. And so the limit, what causes the asymptote in the first place, there's a number of different factors, but one of those factors is these predator-prey relationships. So from the prey point of view, one of the things that limits that results in the population asymptoting is that the individuals in the population are eaten by predators. For the predators, one of the things that limits that population growth is the amount of food that they have to use to reproduce or to use to survive. And that's provided by the prey. We looked at this in competition, and now we're going to look at this in predator-prey relationships, how one population affects the other one. So, as I said, we looked at competition, one population affecting another population in terms of competition. We can also apply this equation to predator-prey interactions. And it might seem like when you're going through these different equations, there's not really very many things in that. And as I mentioned, one of the very first days of class is that there's not going to be much math in this class. And for these equations, and some of the equations later, when we look at community diversity, if you want to look this up, I mean, no one's going to do this from memory. They're going to look this up, and if they even do. So it's going to be the same here. But basically, we're going to look at what happens to a predator population, mathematically, what influences it, and what happens to a prey population in terms of them interacting with one another. So in other words, what effect does prey population have on predator population? What effect does the predator population have on the prey population? And it's going to be as simple as that. It may not seem that simple, but it is. So here's one of those equations. We're going to look at two equations, and if you look at this equation, that the d over the dt, that's a change over time. And n, the prey, is the prey population. So basically what that means is, how is the prey population changing over time? Well, what influences the prey population? One is the reproduction, new individuals, whether they're born or whether they're hatched, however they're made. You've got the prey population increasing at a certain rate. So this exponential growth rate. And for different species, they're reproducing at different rates. So that rate is fast for some species and it's slow for other species. But either way, their population is increasing because new individuals are coming into that population. So that's how the population would grow on its own, with no other interaction of another species. Then there's predation. And predation, how many individuals are being killed, so there's basically birth rate minus the death rate. That's how this population is growing. That's how this population is changing over time. It's growing at a certain rate because there's a certain number of individuals born, and there's a certain number that are killed, that are eaten by predators. So this C in prey and in predator, pred, that reflects predation. And the influence of the predator population is reflected in how big that population is. So in pred is the size of the predator population. And then there's this efficiency of predation, how efficient predators are. And it's presumed to be a constant, that a certain number of predators are going to prey on a certain number of prey. They're going to eat a certain number of prey. So the more predators you have, the bigger that blue N is, then the more prey are going to be eaten. That's basically what this is saying. So the prey population is increasing at a certain rate, but there's individuals in that prey population that are being removed by predators by being eaten, and that number is being influenced by the size of the predator population. So that's one part of this Lotka-Volterra model, and here it is looking again, that the size of the prey population, you can stop for a minute and look at this if you want, but the size of the prey population results from two factors: the population growth, how fast they're reproducing, minus the individuals being killed, being eaten by predators. And that, again, is a factor. It's influenced by the size of the predator population. If there's not very many predators, then not very many prey are going to be eaten. If there's a lot of predators, then there's going to be more prey that are going to be eaten. So you can imagine that the bigger the predator population is, the more the prey population is going to be affected by predation. The smaller the predator population, then the less the prey population is going to be affected by predation. So here's another way of looking at this. A couple of things that we've looked at earlier in the semester. For instance, this intrinsic rate of growth or intrinsic rate of increase. That a population is increasing at a certain rate, but it's being reduced by predation. There's birth rate There's a hatching rate, however these new individuals come into existence, but that's what's influencing the growth. And without predators, without a limit of food, without a limit of water, shelter, these different things, this rate of growth of the prey population would be exponential. But it's not. There's limits to the rate at which population grows because of a variety of factors. One of them, and what we're focusing our attention on now, is predators. Predators are one factor that's limiting the growth rate of populations, and one of the explanations for why populations don't grow exponentially, but they demonstrate this sigmoidal, this logistic S-shaped curve, and they asymptote. Let's shift our attention to the predator population. What is influencing the predator population? Now, most predators, they have predators of their own. So their population is being affected by predators. But in this case, we're looking at the effect of prey on the population of predators. So we're not going to talk about predators actually being eaten by other predators. But what's influencing the predator population is the birth rate. They're growing at a certain rate. The population is growing at a certain rate because they're being born at a certain rate. And what's detracting from that population are deaths. There's a mortality rate. And so for some predators that don't have very many predators, some predators that are very good at surviving, this death of the predators is relatively small. It's relatively minor. They get to be a certain age, they have a certain lifespan, and they get to be 20 years old, and that's about as long as they live, and they start dying from old age. But they're very good at competing, they're very good at surviving. So the birth rate and the minus the death rate is basically what determines the predator population. Now this death rate, you could throw in predation. They're being preyed upon themselves. But really, one of the big influences is how much food they have. That's going to influence what their population is like. So let's look at those two factors, the birth rate minus the death rate, basically. This is for the predator population, and this demonstrates how prey, theoretically, influence the predator population. So if you look at this figure, again, the d over dt, that's a change over time. And in this case, it's not the prey population, but it's the predator population. In pred is what's happening to the predator population over time. So the interaction and how the prey population is influencing the predator population is by the prey population, the size of the prey population, because that's influencing the birth rate of the predators. And it's doing that because the more prey there are, the more food there is, the more energy there is, the more of that energy is channeled towards reproduction, the higher the birth rate. And so the faster the population grows. Less prey, the smaller prey population, the smaller in prey, that red words, letters in this equation, the smaller that is, then the less energy there is for the predators, the smaller the birth rate is going to be. And so it influences the rate at which the predator population is growing because it's influencing their birth rate. Less energy for reproduction, basically. And then there's the death rate of the predators. They're being eaten. They're getting to be a certain age. They can't find as much food. Whatever the different biological characteristics of this population are, this species, then they have a certain lifespan. So they get to be a certain age and they start dying. We see that in humans. You see that in some species it's days, some species it's years, some species it's many years. But species only live to be a certain age and they die. There's other things that that cause them to die. There's diseases and predators, as I mentioned, and there's also food availability. So the predator population then is being influenced heavily by the prey population, that N prey in the red, because it's influencing the birth rate so much. Death rate is detracting, making the population decline, making it grow slower, and making it reach an asymptote and not demonstrate exponential growth, but demonstrate this logistic growth curve. And so the idea is that these two interacting features of a prey population affecting a predator population, and a predator population affecting a prey population, that they go hand in hand with one another. And a prey can have a big influence on the predator population. Predator population can have a big influence on the prey population. So if you look at these figures down below here, that if you're talking about the prey population growth at that dashed line there, where the prey population isn't growing anymore, is where those two factors balance one another. There's certain birth rate or hatching, and the population is increasing at a certain rate. And then there's a certain rate at which they're removed by predators. And when that's balanced, then you no longer have the population growing. So for every individual that's born, one of them is eaten. And so, I mean, that's an unrealistic situation, but it happens in the long run if the population's remaining stable. But really what happens is the population dips down below that dashed line, it goes up above that dashed line, and things balance out over time. The figure on the right is talking about the predator population. The predator population doesn't increase when the prey population is at a certain level that provides a certain amount of energy for reproduction that balances the death rate of the predators, basically. So if there's more prey and more energy towards reproduction, then the predator population can increase on the right of that dashed line. If there's less prey and less energy towards reproduction, and the birth rate doesn't keep up with the death rate of predators, then the predator population can decline, which is to the left of that dashed line. And there's this ideal situation, maybe once in a while it goes back and forth on either side of this dashed line, but there's this situation where the birth rate is equal to the death rate. And so for every individual born, there's one that dies, or for everyone that dies, there's a new one that's born. And so the predator population does not change. The individuals in the population change, but the number doesn't change. So that's this idea of one population influencing the other. Predator population influencing the prey population influencing the predators. And so theoretically, you have this cycle that can take place. Sometimes it's a drastic cycle with big fluctuations in the population of prey, especially, and predator to a certain extent. But this is what happens. If you take a minute and look at these arrows, and you look at the pluses and minuses, then this is that movement to one side or the other of that dashed line that I showed you in that last figure, that what's happening to the prey population and what's happening to the predator population. So this is that figure with the dashed line and arrows actually in action and changing. So if you take a minute, you can pause this video and as you can throughout the whole thing and look at what's happening with the predator population. So in one instance, you have predators up in the right corner. You have the predator population increasing, which is leading to the prey population decreasing. The more predators are eating more prey. And then there's less food, so the predator population starts to decline because there's less energy for reproduction. So you have that top left corner. square. Where the prey population is down, the predator population is down. Well, fewer predators means a higher birth rate for the prey. So the prey population goes up. Now the prey population, or the prey, has a plus sign. Predator population is still down. But as the prey population goes up, more food for the predators, they start reproducing at a faster rate. Now the predator population goes up. So in the lower right, you've got the prey with a plus and the predator with a plus. Of course, that can only happen so long. Now the predators start feeding on this abundant prey, and it knocks the prey population down, and you're back to that square up in the right-hand corner. So around and around it goes. And another way of looking at that would be that asymptote of that logistic growth curve. Thinking about looking at a prey population, for instance. The prey population goes up, and then it goes down. And it goes up, and then it goes down, depending on the predators. And so you have the cyclical fluctuation in the carrying capacity of a prey population. The same thing if you looked at the predator population by itself. And if you combine these, and if you threw in the timing at which these peaks and valleys are taking place, this is basically what it would look like theoretically. That the prey population goes up, more food for the predators. Predators are eating more prey, so the prey population goes down. That this golden line, the prey population is knocked down by the predators. Now the prey population reaches a low, less food for reproduction for the predators, so the predator population goes down. Because there's fewer predators, the prey population goes up. Because there's more prey, the predator population goes up, and around it goes, up and down, up and down, and up and down. But there's a delay between this peak in the prey population and the trough in the prey population and the predator. The predator changes lag behind the changes in the prey population. But in this figure, you can see how the predator population affects the prey population. When the predator population goes up, the prey population goes down. And you can see how the prey population affects the predator population. So that's what this whole lock of Volterra, if you're visualizing this, the influence of one population on the other one, it basically looks like this. All right, so we're going to look at this classic example of predator-prey relationships and how the population of a predator was for a long time thought to directly influence the population of prey. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than that.